For 2.5 years, I have gone to great lengths to avoid COVID. Like many of you, I have perfected medical-grade hand washing. I have Zoomed. Boy, have I Zoomed. And I have watched the count go up and then down and then up again. In fact, last summer, I participated in Hartman online because we were not going to be able to come together in person. But this summer, triumphantly, Hartman returned in person in Jerusalem. And I was so excited to go back to Israel again. The learning was stimulating. The company of like-minded learners, delightful. Until suddenly I found myself among the count. At first, I was feverish and fitfully in and out of sleep. So grateful to my dear doctor friends who were on the line with me, keeping me calm with their loving care. When I was up, I couldn't even follow the plot of a TV show. But on the third day of my bidud, the Israeli word for isolation, I woke up with an overwhelming feeling that I wasn't doing this right. I really should be getting more done. I should be using this time wisely. I should be reading the books that I had brought, or studying Hebrew, or Zooming into classes, or maybe I should be writing my high holiday sermons. Okay, I had to be isolated, but there was so much that I could do. And so I counted the steps that I could take from one wall of the hotel room to the other. It was 18. And I thought, wow, it's a sign. And so I vowed to get my 10,000 steps every day. No worries, it was just back and forth 555 times. You know, friends kept checking in on me and encouraging me that I should use this time to catch up. And I dreamed of some story that I would tell someday about how effective I had been during Bidud, managing to keep the ball rolling and continuing to be helpful to others from right there in my hotel room. Then my friendly Microsoft Viva popped up on my phone one morning announcing, "It's almost the end of the week. Make today count." And suddenly, the pathology that entailed hit me hard. There's a Bob Dylan song that bubbled up in some dusty corner of my brain as a visceral response. He sang, "Strap yourself to a tree with roots, you ain't going nowhere." You know, Bob Dylan wrote that song after a motorcycle accident that had impacted his mobility back in 1966. He found himself unhappily holed up, disconnected from his regular hustle and bustle, laid up, just trying to heal. The song is famous for its incoherence of its lyrics, but there's a deep countercultural wisdom at its core. The value of giving ourselves time to rest, time to recharge, time to unplug. He's saying, I don't care how many letters they sent. The morning came and the morning went. Pick up your money, pack up your tent. You ain't going nowhere. That wisdom is often lost in our time. We've come to expect so much of ourselves that even when we literally cannot go anywhere, we expect ourselves to be everywhere. It's a toxic side effect that was accelerated in our pandemic. All of the digital connection and remote work means that we can always be working. How many of you have sent or gotten emails from someone who was on vacation? Be honest. This week, I had 2 Zoom meetings that started with the other person apologizing for the backdrop of a hotel bed or greenery in the background. Why? They were on vacation. When I asked them why they didn't reschedule, they each replied that mine was just one of many appointments that they had scheduled throughout the week remotely. Sure, they were on vacation, but they were working from paradise. What is it in us that cannot let go, that expects of ourselves that we always be available, that we're always on? What is it about our culture that expects that of us? During our first days of Hartman, we had an incredible visit with Micha Goodman and a panel of bright, up-and-coming superstar graduates of Beit Prat, a mission-driven Israeli community-building organization devoted to getting post-army young Israelis to set aside time out of their lives to grow together, to create a healthier society. And you know what? On our way in, we were each invited to put our phones in a time-out receptacle hanging by the door. Micha shared the ways that technology and always being on is corroding our ability to connect and care and create. His whole audacious endeavor at Beit Prat is built in carving out a respite from that, a sanctuary in time. In a life cycle, you have ages and stages, he said. Kids, and then teens, young adults, adulthood. We, in Israel, he continued, have an age that you don't have anywhere else in the world. Achrei hatzava, after the army. In it, he described an age where the rest of society gives a certain latitude for taking a break, for hiking the Himalayas or backpacking in Bali or a vision quest. And he said it is in that age where his hopes for Israel lie. As members and the graduates of Beit Prat spoke, we heard again and again the possibility of that phase, of that time when you could imagine that society could free you to take a rest and come to learn something new about yourself. I was hiking the Israel Trail when I heard about Elul, the 40-day program of learning and connecting at Beit Prat, one graduate said, and it changed my life. I grew up Orthodox, but that wasn't me anymore, said another, and I was feeling really lost until I heard about the 4-month intensive program. And I disconnected, and I went, and I found a new connection. What did the program ask of them? To unplug and to get to know face-to-face people who are different through the study of ancient text and modern philosophy, through song and yoga, through poetry and prayer and politics. They could find a shared and more hopeful future. And indeed, they were so hopeful. It was mind-blowing. In one of the most stunning Shabbat evening services I have had the blessing to attend, and that's saying a lot because I get to pray with Cantor Elias Rosenberg and our extraordinary Shabbat Alive team every Friday night. There, these young people, secular and religious, gathered in an outdoor courtyard for modern music, followed by heartfelt prayer. And there were young adults with tzitzit and open sandals next to those wearing crop tops, next to others with the clean-cut frum uniform of white shirts and black velvet kippot. And somehow, in this space, their harmonies and melodies soared around us, as right before our eyes, this disparate community became a living embodiment of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's famous teaching that the power of Shabbat is the way that its true observance creates a sanctuary in time, a place to discover something you can't discover when you are just moving and doing and going. The Torah portion that night was Korach, and given that the Darshan, Matanya Elitzur, spoke about the weighty and painful topic of the collapse of the Israeli government earlier that week, I expected a downer of a drash. Instead, the most brilliant and hopeful way that I ever could have imagined, Matanya pointed out how Korach was undone by his ego. An ego that believed that the world could not function without him. That, of course, God would accept his offering because he was the guy who needed to be front and center all the time. It's an error that's not Korach's alone. We so often believe in our own outsized import, that the world will not be able to go on turning if we put our email down. But that orientation is a killer of health and a killer of hope. We see its corrosive effects this week in the Torah reading we just read of Moses at the rock. While Moses obviously didn't have email or texts or WhatsApp pinging him, he did have the constant needs of the people, which he never put down. Even if we look carefully, we see immediately after the death of his beloved sister, when he didn't take the time to mourn, he didn't take the time to hold her memory and retreat, and instead went right back to work until he gets so fed up that he yells, "Listen, you rebels, shall we draw water from you out of this rock?" And famously, he strikes it. One moment of burnout, and he seals his fate. What might that story have looked like if he had taken a beat, if he had paused to truly mourn, to give himself space to rest? We know he had the capacity to do it. Matanya had shared the week before how much of a role model Moses had been in that last chapter, when in dealing with Korach, Moses paused before he responded right away. As he put it, like an old Rebbe stroking his beard, Moses had the humility to take a beat and to take a breath. Can we? Micha Goodman writes, until recently, people were not expected to be reachable at the drop of a hat. But nowadays, it's considered impolite not to reply to an email in a matter of hours or to a text message in a matter of minutes. That new norm, he wrote, comes at a cost. The more available we are, the less attentive we are. A healthy technological culture, he continues, would flip those preferences and prioritize attention over availability. In such a culture, peeking at one's phone during a conversation would be considered extremely rude. The mark of good parenting would be not replying to the children's text messages within seconds, but switching off our phones while spending time together. Today, Micha taught at a previous Hartman, when you are constantly connected, you are also constantly distracted. And so he concluded we have to have moments when our machines are off and we are on. I believe this with my whole heart. And this reflection on how we should unplug and why, when life stops us in our tracks, we should just be and not do, was written while I was plugged in during B-Dude. So let's just say I'm working on it. So may we all. We rise.